ambassador for women and girls. The previous ambassador, Penny Williams, did a wonderful job as the inaugural ambassador, but I know that Natasha Stott-Despoja will make this role her own. About 12 years ago, Natasha and I were on a parliamentary visit to the Pacific, and I recall vividly our first stop in the Solomon Islands. At that time, the Solomons was going through a period of conflict and turmoil, and the then Foreign Minister, Alexander Downer, met with the parliamentarians of the Solomon Islands, all male, in Parliament House. Natasha and I were outside, and we met a group of women who were weaving baskets, doing handicrafts for sale in the markets. And during our discussion, I will never forget one of the women saying, "There will not be peace in the Solomon Islands until we are in there," pointing to the Parliament House. And I've never forgotten that very simple but powerful message. Now, as Australia's first female Foreign Minister, I believe that we are able to put the challenges facing women and the issues facing women at the heart of our foreign policy. Under a coalition government, Australia's foreign policy is designed to project and protect our reputation as an open, export-oriented market economy. It's also designed to project and protect our reputation as an open, liberal democracy committed to values of freedom and the rule of law and democratic institutions and human rights. And as Hillary Clinton once said, women's rights are human rights. We're also focusing on economic diplomacy. Now, just as traditional diplomacy aims for peace, so economic diplomacy aims for prosperity. And that means if you are to pursue these aims, women must be at the heart of your policy. In our aid program, we have brought AusAid into the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade so that we can align all our efforts within the department, our resources, our people, our creative thinking, our policies. And in the aid area in particular, one of our pillars will be relating to women. Over 50% of our aid initiatives are directed towards women. And there are 3 areas where we will focus. Women's economic empowerment, giving women access to resources and assets and finance so that women across our region can take part in the formal labour market, can be part of the formal economy, and can be part of developing economic growth in their particular country. Secondly, we're focusing on women's leadership, whether it be political or business or community or family. We want to empower women to take leadership positions at whatever level, be part of the decision making at family, business, community, political level. And third, we will focus on combating violence against women and their families. And whether it's announcing funding for a case management program in Lae in Papua New Guinea, as I did the other day, whether it's supporting women in Vietnam, across the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, we will be supporting the fight against domestic violence, that affects so many women and their families. And I can't think of a better advocate for Australia than Natasha Stott-Despoja. Natasha came into Parliament as the youngest woman ever to be elected to Australia's Parliament at the ripe old age of 26, and she became a senator for South Australia. So she and I have a bit in common there for a start, both hailing from South Australia. Natasha proved to be a formidable opponent for those who crossed her path. She was a very strong policy advocate. She introduced many bills. She worked very hard in the Senate. All of the opportunities available to a senator she took up to promote the causes that were dear to her. And for 13 years, She represented her party and her state with distinction. She is a mum. She has 2 children and a husband who support her, and she left politics after being the leader of her party, but she didn't stop promoting the causes about which she feels passionate, and that includes setting up a foundation last year to combat domestic violence against women and their families. And this foundation was focused on the domestic policy framework in Australia and initiatives that she could put in place to help women in these situations. When I became Foreign Minister and I knew that the position for Ambassador for Women and Girls was available to be filled, I could think of no better person than Natasha Stott Despoja. She is a powerful woman. She is a great role model for all, and already her voice is being heard on the world stage. She accompanied me to the Pacific just before Christmas, and I observed Natasha engaging so enthusiastically with women and men, policymakers, decision makers, from those running shelters to those in their parliaments, and I knew she would make an impact. Natasha has also represented Australia at an ASEAN meeting in Indonesia. This is the 40th year of Australia's engagement with the ASEAN countries as a dialogue partner, and we asked Natasha to represent Australia as they focused on some of the gender issues and gender equality issues that beset the nations of ASEAN. And later this month, she will be part of Australia's delegation to the UN Commission on Women's Issues at the United Nations. I have a very full program designed for Natasha, and given our focus on the Indian Ocean, Asia Pacific, I'm sure she will be very soon a familiar face and a familiar voice in that region. But her voice will be heard, and that's why Senator Michaelia Cash and I both approached the Prime Minister and asked that this appointment be made. And as Michaelia will confirm, the Prime Minister was enthusiastic from the moment he heard her name and said, yes, Natasha is precisely the figure that we want representing Australia. She's precisely the person with the character, the values, the interest, the passion to get across our message about the empowerment of women and girls.
The Foreign Minister last year called me and she said, Michaelia, the position of Ambassador for Women and Girls. There's a name I'm going to put forward. I'd like your reaction. Natasha Stott Despoja. I think quite literally there were squeals at both ends of the phone. We can do girly things occasionally. Quite seriously though, as the Minister has stated, there was no other name, quite literally. Natasha just stands head and shoulders above others when it comes to her genuine passion, but not only that, her record throughout her career when it comes to promoting gender equality and the human rights of women, both domestically and internationally. I have the role this morning of formally introducing our new ambassador, Natasha Stott Despoja, to you. As we all know, and as the Foreign Minister has already stated, the ambassador has an exceptionally important role to play, both domestically and overseas. She is responsible for high-level advocacy to promote Australian government policy and activity regarding gender equality and the social, political and economic empowerment of women and girls, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region. As you would be aware, and I think everybody here does know Natasha Stott Despoja, her achievements to date make her without a doubt absolutely ideal for this role. Throughout her work as the non-executive director at the Burnett Institute, Ambassador Stott Despoja has travelled to Southeast Asia to raise issues in relation to maternal and child health. She has an enduring interest in women's leadership, being obviously a leader herself, particularly political and parliamentary leadership. On a personal note for me, in my role as the Minister assisting the Prime Minister for Women, I look forward to continuing the very close relationship that I have with the Ambassador in relation to her role as Chair, as the foundation to reduce violence against women and children. And certainly the Ambassador and I have already had many conversations and many meetings in relation to how we both can tackle this issue. As the Foreign Minister stated, Ambassador Stotsvoya will play an invaluable role as she accompanies me next week to the 58th Commission on the Status of Women. And I can see here today some of the other people from the NGOs who will also be joining us. Ambassador Stotsvoya also has a very important role to play in seeking to protect women and girls in conflict and promoting the role of women in peace building. As most people in this room would be aware, United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 and the suite of supporting Security Council resolutions calls for an end to the impunity of sexual-based violence in conflict situations and highlights the need for promoting women's participation in conflict prevention, peace building and post-conflict reconstruction efforts. And in fact, I'll be in Melbourne tonight as part of my International Women's Day events to address these issues. Australia's commitment to this UN resolution has been affirmed through our National Action Plan in relation to women, peace and security. As the Minister assisting the Prime Minister for Women, I personally look forward to delivering the Australian Government's first progress report on the National Action Plan later this year and to working closely with Ambassador Stotsvoya in relation to the roles women play in conflict and post-conflict situations. Ladies and gentlemen, enough from me. It's now time to put your hands together and welcome to the stage Australia's Ambassador for Women and Girls, Natasha Stotsvoya.
Not so much head and shoulders there, Michaelia. Some of us a little vertically challenged. Good morning, everyone. I begin, of course, by acknowledging the traditional owners. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and also to any other elders from any other communities who may be present here today. I'd also like to acknowledge, of course, the ministers. Minister Julie Bishop, the Foreign Minister of Australia, Minister Michaelia Cash, who is, of course, the Minister assisting the Prime Minister on the status of women. To the other ministers and shadow ministers, to Parliamentary Secretary Brett Mason, who is here, indeed to members of the Diplomatic Corps, and I look particularly at that strong group of female ambassadors in the room today. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. Ladies and gentlemen, members of many organisations here today, and indeed Shirley Stotsvoya, Mum, thanks for coming. I also want to add on to the comments by Minister Bishop about my predecessor, Penny Williams. It would not be appropriate for us not to acknowledge her work today. I look forward so much to building on the groundbreaking work that she did in this role. Thank you, Ministers, for very generous comments today. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you for honouring me with this appointment. Thank you for trusting me with this role. And you certainly know how to host a welcome party. I also want to say thank you to the many organisations, many individuals, many representatives who are in the room today. Many of you have worked for a long time with great personal commitment in order to advocate on behalf of women and girls, not just in Australia, but beyond. I look around and some of you I know very well. Some of you are dear friends, some of you I know from former lives, some of you I have looked up to, admired, been mentored by, and have appreciated